Hi people, it's Archivist here, and today I want to give 2 recommendations for games to play during lockdown. The great thing about being a gamer is that you already have a hobby that is like custom made for this unprecedented situation where you can just stay at home and spend hours upon hours of entertaining yourself without having to go out and, well, socially interact with anyone. And for a lot of people, including myself, that was the bonus already, but now that so many of us are forced to socially distance, it's actually become even more widely useful to people. And there were certain titles that I would not necessarily have recommended as much before because they were so much of a time sink, but now something that's a time sink is exactly what a lot of us need. To some extent it depends on our situation because for some people, like myself, I am still working, but I'm working from home, and during my free time I don't have too much else to do but play games and, well, go on the occasional walk to keep my sanity. I suppose if you're in a situation where you can't work from home and you are just at home, this is even more relevant. And so the 2 games I want to talk about, well, we'll start with the first one, and it's kind of an obvious one really, is World of Warcraft. World of Warcraft's infamy comes from the fact it's a game that you can absolutely lose yourself in. And at times, I remember back in school when I was studying for my GCSEs and my A-levels, that was not a good thing because its addictive qualities meant that I spent more time playing this game when I should have been revising. But now, at a time where a lot of us have tons of free time, it's actually a fantastic game to be playing. The core concepts of it, where you are doing a lot of basic tasks in order to slowly progress up a series of levels up to, at the moment, 120 levels, is fantastic for just consuming time, and you do it all in this very rich, detailed world with a ton of history and story to ingest. So if you're someone who used to play World of Warcraft, well, this is as good a time as any to play the game. It's in a reasonably interesting state. Like, we've definitely been at patches and expansions that have been worse than this, but this situation is what really makes it worth coming back to. And to be honest, even if the current state of the game isn't necessarily super interesting, you could at least consider it an opportunity to level up a character and get them ready for the next expansion, Shadowlands, coming out later in the year. And I've found it just to be so brilliant for this situation where if you decide that you want to create a new character and take them up to max level and get them into endgame content, that takes a lot of time, and usually that can be quite off-putting. But now that I know that I have a lot of time, I feel as if even if the journey is just interesting enough to keep you going, but admittedly not super exciting in and of itself, but again, with the current situation, that kind of works to its advantage, where you're doing all these repetitive tasks where you're going out on a quest, you're killing 6 enemies here, 7 there, 8 here, collecting things, clicking on things. Sometimes you will go into a very significant story quest, and that can be more interesting. But a lot of the time you are doing, admittedly, mundane stuff, but it does just pad the game out in a way that is currently very useful for a game to be padded out. So if you've already played World of Warcraft in the past, I don't really have to tell you any of this. It's a game that requires a lot of attention, a lot of cooperation, and also there's a massive social element to it as well, and that's something that at the moment is probably quite advantageous, where you won't be able to necessarily go out and meet your friends or family, but you can play with them and cooperate with them in World of Warcraft. So it can even substitute the social element that a lot of us are missing at the moment in the real world. And again, if you've played it already and are thinking of coming back to it, this will be a very good time to do it. If you've never played World of Warcraft before, I would say that this is a very good time to get into it. World of Warcraft is a game that I think is very friendly to new players, because even though if you want to really challenge yourself, there are these heroic raids where many players have to come together and cooperate with very high precision in order to defeat enemies and get the most powerful armor and weapons and such. At the very low end of the skill chain is when you start playing, and you are just starting out, getting used to your very basic abilities. If you choose to play a mage, you're just learning to throw your first fireball. If you're a warrior, it's using your sword, and you're doing it on the most basic enemies you can imagine, and it really is a very easy experience to just train yourself up on. Where there are a lot of mundane tasks, it gives you plenty of time to master the nuance of your character. And it's not necessarily all about combat. There are these professions as well where you can learn to do alchemy and jewelry crafting, mining, all these other things that supplement your character. So it's not all about fighting if that's not really your style. And the world, like, I envy someone in a way who hasn't played World of Warcraft yet, because when you first experience Azeroth, and it is an absolutely massive world at this point with all the expansions that have come. There is so much to see, so much variety, so many different stories, landscapes and vistas. Admittedly, when you first start out, you have to keep in mind you are in regions that were originally crafted way over a decade ago now. There has been a coat of polish applied to them, but you can see that they were made a long time ago. But don't let that put you off, because as you get into the later areas, such as the one you'll be seeing in the gameplay, you'll notice that although this is an old engine, the game actually can look very nice. It has these very well crafted landscapes and regions to explore, and the first time you see them, it is a lot of fun. And also just going through dungeons or working together as a group of 5 is very enjoyable, and then the larger ones at the higher levels. And also, even though I don't really do it because I'm, well, to be frank, no good at it, there's also player versus player where you can fight other people, and there's like an infinite amount of challenge in that, especially with all the different classes, you know, to say like warrior and mage and priest and things of this nature to consider. So that's World of Warcraft. If you're looking for a game to quite simply take up your time, I really can't think of anything else better than this. It is definitely my #1 recommendation. Another one is ultra specific, and I was just going to talk about World of Warcraft, but I'm just going to mention it because it's been so interesting and surprising for me, was this fighting game called Dragon Ball FighterZ. And the reason I'm recommending it is somewhat for the opposite of World of Warcraft, actually. So whereas in World of Warcraft you get better by essentially playing the game because you will just level up, get more powerful, get better armor, get better weapons, so on and so forth, a fighting game is a game you get better at by actually having to become more skillful. And I am not someone who has previously been that into fighting games, but I've always appreciated that there's a really high skill ceiling in some of them. Generally, I've been playing really Mortal Kombat most of the time, but that's almost like, I guess, the tourist's fighting game. It's got a lot of wide appeal, very high production values, and it's a very good series. But I've been playing Dragon Ball FighterZ, and even though I am still very much scratching the surface, I can just tell how enormously high the skill ceiling is for this game. But it's also a game that's just very fun to play. It feels very visceral, very fast paced. It's very engaging. The art style, even though I'm not a massive fan of anime necessarily, but this art style is so unique and creative and striking. Like, if you pause the game at any moment, you know the character's going to be in an interesting position because it's all animated so carefully and clearly. It's also, and I didn't realize I would like this so much, but so crazy over the top with some of the attacks where they'll just take up the entirety of the screen. So I originally got into this game just because someone recommended it to me, and they said, oh, there's this fighting game called Dragon Ball, and I responded, well, I don't really like Dragon Ball. I've never really got into it, and I'm not that great at fighting games, but I just started playing it. And you can set the initial skill levels very low of the AI, or you can play the story mode, and it makes it very easy to initially get into. But I'm just finding myself playing and playing, and the more my muscle memory develops for how the enemies are going to fight me and how I need to react, and also what my tool set is, the more I'm finding myself enjoying it. And I've even dabbled in a couple of online matches, which I was initially extremely reserved about doing. Again, I'm just not someone who's that great at fighting games. But even though I got my arse handed to me a fair few times, I can just tell that it's going to be worth it to grind up the skill and to master some of these characters. And it's going to take me a long time that lockdown is now affording me to get good with Dragon Ball FighterZ. And also they're always coming out with new characters as well. It is paid DLC, but these are quality characters, so I honestly have no arguments with it whatsoever. They recently released this, as you'll see me play, this Ultra Instinct character who has got this really fantastic and fun and frenetic tool set to use, and I'm just still trying to get the hang of it. But it adds this game that is still evolving. It came out a while ago now, but it is something that's getting ongoing support, and the characters are getting balanced and things of that nature. So this is a game that I would imagine that if you're and I'm describing myself a few months ago on this, by the way, someone who's not a massive fighting game fan, or not a massive Dragon Ball fan, sorry, you would look at this and think, why on earth would I be into this? But just give it a try. Just give it a little bit of a try, because I was in that position. Someone had to convince me to try it, and now I'm honestly kind of hooked. And most people who I know who have been recommending it, I've been saying, well, what do you think of it? And they love it. It's like now their favourite fighting game. And I remember when I first heard about it, and I was quite into Smash Bros. Ultimate, and people were voting on the best fighting game of the year, and I was expecting everyone to say, yes, of course it's Smash Ultimate, but they were mentioning, no, it's Dragon Ball FighterZ. Like, what the hell is Dragon Ball FighterZ? Why is that any good? And now I'm realising, oh wait, maybe they were right. This is a really, really great game. So, whereas with World of Warcraft, I recommend it, and it still is my number one recommendation because it's a pure time sink in terms of progressing up and leveling up and moving throughout the continent. I recommend this game because I feel like if you got good at it, you would feel really good, as I'm finding myself very gradually moving up. It's super satisfying to actually get better at it. And even though you are playing with the very same characters, with the very same abilities that you may start as, you'll find yourself getting so much better with using them. I also, this is my first fighting game ever where it's team-based, so you have 3 characters on each side, and you can swap them out as you play. And initially I didn't really like that. I preferred just knowing I have one character to control versus a character to fight, but I've realised that there's a great dynamic where you can swap characters in, let another one heal up, and then you can even bring in an assist so the other character jumps in. So yeah, it's really a fantastic game, and I feel crazy that I missed it when it came out, because this is just a hidden gem as far as I'm concerned. But going online looking at guides, I can see there is a very dedicated community for this, and I'm not surprised at all. It's a really great game, and I hope they continue to support it and release characters. I believe there are definitely some more coming, and now that I'm getting a little bit, to be honest, more interesting in the Dragon Ball universe, I'm actually kind of excited at the prospect of certain characters being added to it. So, yep, there you go. My 2 recommendations for lockdown, based on what I'm doing and what I'm enjoying and finding is giving me a lot of hours of play. World of Warcraft, that raw, ultimate time sink to really get your teeth into something. And then there's a very specific, unusual, out of the blue recommendation, but I'm giving it anyway, is Dragon Ball FighterZ, because it's something that you can master and probably feel quite good when you do so. As always, people, thanks very much for watching, and see you next time.